So she was like, okay. So she like snuck him and took him off, gave him to him, and then he just smelled them. And the guy was just looking crazy, like, oh my gosh. And so then he wanted to finger her. Like, he's like, he has a real possession problem. So they get to the restaurant. They're all hot and bothered. The restaurant is owned by Marco. True Italian, authentic Italian food. And whilst dinner and things are being served, of course, Roth is like fingering her underneath the table. And he actually makes her come while Marco is talking to them. And Marco's looking at her like, what is wrong with you? And she's like, I just got something caught in my throat. I'm okay. And he's looking at her like, are you sure? So as she starts to come down off of her little orgasm high, she's like, I'm okay, but this food is so amazing. Like, I just can't wait to dig in. So they eat a little, but it's like he is so turned on. Roth is turned on, and she dares him. And that's the worst thing you could do. He's like, he's like, I am so tempted. I'll throw you over my shoulder and walk out of here. And she's like, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do some caveman stuff. He's like, I won't. And so, sure enough, he calls Marco. Marco runs over. Keep in mind, Marco was the owner of this restaurant. He runs over, and he's like, Senor. And he's like, can you pack this up? We got to go. So he throws like $1,000 on the table, and she's thinking they're about to walk out the door, but nah, he's going to carry you out over his shoulder just the way he said, and that's what he did. And so when they get outside, he smacks her on the butt, and she's just like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you? So he's like, you don't understand what you're doing to me. Like, you don't get it. He's like, and if you keep doing stuff, I'm going to have to pull over in the alley and F you. And she's like, oh my gosh. So they finally make it back. To the penthouse, and they have like this crazy, it was just something you can't even imagine. It was just that powerful and just that erotic and intoxicating, and they just couldn't get enough of each other. It was just like they had sex so many times, and then they were famished, so they had some of the leftovers. Eliza had made a cheesecake, so they had some of that. And she knew, like, she could feel it. She's like, I'm falling in love with this man. And it's only been like a couple days, like a few days at this point. And but she felt it. She knew it was there. And so she's like, I know it's not just the earth-shattering sex. It's just the idea. It's like he truly gets me, like really, really gets me. So the next morning they have sex again, and she can kind of see that there's like this distance with him. Like there's this conflict in his eyes, and she was just kind of nervous because she's like, shoot, he's not, feeling like after the kind of earth-shattering sex we just had, like I don't expect to see conflict in his eyes. And he's like, I gotta tell you something. And so she's like, okay, what? He's like, what I'm about to tell you, could definitely change how you feel about me, and you might decide to leave. And he says, if you do, I will understand. I will still do anything for you. You will always be taken care of. I meant that. He was like, but I'm the one that's responsible for your father's death. And I was like, oh, shoot. Like, wow. Like, that's a big one, because that was like the downfall of her life. So then she's like, wait a minute. This don't make sense. What in the world? Like, what do you mean? Ooh, I'm confused. What do you mean? How? That's not possible. So he's like, are you sure you don't remember me? And then when she looked at him, it hit her. She had only seen him for like a split moment, but she did remember him years ago, 7 years ago. She was going to, her dad owned an auto shop. And so she was coming to see her dad, and she was like, it was the first time he had ever looked like he was too busy to talk to her. But she remembers seeing this guy, but she just was like, whatever. She saw him, but whatever. And it looked tense in the room. You could tell something was going on, but she just wasn't putting two and two together. Well, at that moment, Roth kind of became obsessed with her, because the minute he saw her, he was like in awe of her. And so Roth starts to describe to her kind of how he made his money. So yes, he had legit, and he still does have legit businesses, but the one that made him the most money was one of the illegal businesses, which was arms dealing. And so he was trying to, there was 3 major businesses that he was trying to kind of put together, because that's what he did. He would, buy up, businesses, and then kind of, either split them up or do something with them, or he would like try and make it into like one huge thing. And so that's what he was trying to do with 3 of these businesses. And the third business was her father's, but he didn't want to sell. And he was like, and even though it was going to make him a lot of money, and I was going to put him at the head of it, so he was going to make even more, it was the idea for him that this was his, this was his, he built this business, and so he wasn't going to let it go. Well, her father was also involved in a lot of other illegal activities. So her father had a high-end escort business, as well as some other illegal dealings. And there's a possibility he could have been into drugs as well. He didn't have all the proof of that. But what he basically was doing was trying to strong arm him into selling. Like, hey, I got this info on you. Sell, or you're going to get exposed. So the dad, one night, he got drunk. He was drunk or high. He clearly was kind of out of his mind. And he goes to see Roth, and they're in the parking garage, and he has a gun. And he was going to kill Roth. And they tussled. The gun went off, and it shot her dad right in the heart. So he was dead within moments. So, of course, because where Roth was staying, it was a cash. It was under the table. So there's no record of him being there. There's no record of him being in Detroit, period. So he couldn't be linked to it, which is why it wound up being just, robbery gone bad is what they wound up basically, labeling that homicide. And she's just like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Like, there's no possible way. Like, my dad was into that. And he's like, I'm not lying to you. I can show you proof of it. Your dad was into a lot of stuff. And she was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like, I can't be here. Like, I can't. She's like, you're the reason why my life went to hell, basically, because once her father died, like, everything kind of went down. And he did try to take care of a lot of things for her. So, for instance, the life insurance that the father had was only worth like $100,000 or $200,000, but he upped it to $1 million to try and help pay for stuff. He also, she did wonder why the house sold so quickly. It was because he bought it. You can buy it through different shell companies, do different things. So it's that you can always find out who bought it, but it takes a lot of effort. So he did it that way, so that way she would have money. The vehicles that she sold, because they had like a Mercedes, and they had like another Lincoln SUV. He bought those, so he did things to try and help to make life easier for her. And then he tried to step back, as long as he could, until her life started to fall apart again, which it did, and she became so much debt that's when he started sending the money. And so he at one point was going, because I think this has been over a 7-year period. So he had been going to Detroit different times checking on her, but then his business picked up because he's completely out of like arms dealing and things like that. All his stuff is above board, legit businesses. And so he couldn't, go and check on her the way he used to. So that's when he started sending Harris, like, a couple times a month to go and check on her. And so it was just too much. And she was just like, I can't be around you. I can't be here. I can't think. Like, I gotta go. And it like she saw this moment. She just saw, it was like he shut down. And he was like, okay, if you want to leave, you can. I understand. Harris will collect your things and he'll take you back. But he says, don't think you can get away from me. He said, because I still own you. And I was like, oh, shoot, So Harris flies her back, and when they land, he takes her. She's like, just take me to Layla's house. And so she takes him to Layla's house, and she just cries that first night. She just cries. She doesn't say anything. She just cries. And Layla, being a great friend that she is, she just allows her to cry. And then after that, the next morning, Layla went and got cinnamon buns and coffee for her. And she's like, okay, girl, let's talk. What's going on? What happened? So she starts telling her about things. She lets her know you can't tell anybody about this. Or she lets her know, everything that happened. And Layla's like, when she gets to the part about him being the person that killed her father, she's like, okay, so you know who killed your dad. Like, go to the police. And she's like, I can't. Like, I can't do it, And she's like, it's not going to change anything. Like, my father's still dead. She's like, yeah, but, I mean, you now know who did it. She's like, maybe it was an accident or maybe it wasn't. I don't know. And so she's like, I don't know. I just don't know what to do. She's like, I don't think he's lying. She's like, I kind of remember one night my dad coming home and he came to tuck me in and he smelled like perfume, and my mom doesn't wear perfume. But I wasn't putting two and two together. So clearly the dad had a whole nother life, okay, that he lived. And, but it was like, how do you balance that? Like, you're in love with someone, but this is also the person that killed your father, and that was like the start of a downfall in your life, and where you all of a sudden, you didn't have simple problems anymore. You had like real life stuff going on, and real life problems that people sometimes never have to go through. You had to deal with it at like 19 years old. So that's a huge conflict for a person. I get that. And so Layla also tells her, because she's like, wait a minute, where's Eric? Well, her and Eric broke up because Layla basically just wanted him to want more for himself, and he didn't want that. He was perfectly fine playing video games, smoking pot, selling a little pot, and having sex with Layla. And to him, he was fine with that life. And even though, like, Layla's like, the sex was great with him, but he just didn't want more for himself, and that's just not enough for me anymore. So they broke up. So they're like, we're just two pathetic people. So they wound up going out to get manis and petties, and then going to a place called Duggar's and having some drinks. Fast forward a month, she's still having wet dreams, waking up, panties soaked, because she keeps having these intense dreams about Roth. She gets a job as a counter clerk, so she's doing like filing, answering phones, things like that, to try and keep her mind busy. And she gotta have money too. So she still hasn't heard a peep from Roth. It's been about 6 weeks, and she was getting to a place where she was like, I miss him so much. I'm gonna go back. So she went to the airport to buy a one-way ticket to LaGuardia Airport, and she chickened out. She didn't do it. And then a few weeks after that, which is probably we're now around 2 months after she left, she got a speeding ticket for $175, and then she got 2 points on her license as well. And so when she went down to the clerk's office to pay it, of course, it's already paid, and she knew he'd done it. And so then, like, A few days later, she's talking to Layla, and Layla's like, thanks for paying the rent. And she's like, hold on. Layla says, thanks for paying the rent again. And she's like, what are you talking about? You know?